Cool. And of course, if you have any questions, you can, thank you, just let me know. Employing a more extreme skepticism than Descartes, Hume questions some of the most basic assumptions about metaphysics and the world. Because, as it turns out, we've discussed before, we don't have immediate experience of the world. We don't have access to objective reality. All we have is either the knowledge impressed upon us, if we take John Locke's account of knowledge acquisition, knowledge impressed upon us, our passive minds, by the external world, or we have innate a priori ideas about the world and we use these to make sense. Our active minds use these to make sense of a passive world, like Descartes would argue. It doesn't matter which of these you adopt. In either case, what we have in the realm of pure reason, if we go down Descartes' path and we question everything that can be questioned, we doubt everything that can be doubted, we're skeptical systematically about everything which exists. This requires that we recede into this realm of pure reason. In this realm of pure reason, we can have certain axiomatic truths that we exist, because there's a doubter who is doing the doubting, that the sum of the interior angles of triangles is 180 degrees. All of these are ideas only. All of these are ideas only. In the realm of pure reason, the only thing which exists are ideas. This presents a problem, as Hume is going to point out, because ideas don't have material existence. We witness things in the real world, and whether or not that's impressed upon our mind or our mind is impressing upon that, all we have of that experience is the idea. So Hume argues that everything falls into one of two categories. Everything is either an idea or it's an impression of ideas. So we have every justifiable belief must either be a relation of ideas or sense impression. Sense impression are the impressions left on us by our experiences of ideas, or the ideas that we have about that experience, that impression that's left upon us. Everything is one of these two things. This is Hume's fork. It's either an idea or an impression of an idea. We have no other knowledge. Epistemologically speaking, we have no other knowledge that's reliable about the world. This is going to have some very serious implications, right? So we have the ideas, the faint images of impressions used for thinking and reasoning. Ideas can be broken up into simple and complex ideas. Let's see what Hume means by this. So we have ideas, green or a green circle, which is very simple, right? Images of impressions used for thinking and reasoning. We also have complex ideas, right? So if I were to say, think of a green circle, you would probably imagine something like this. Most people usually have some kind of capacity for abstraction such that they can imagine in their mind a green circle. This is relatively easy for us to do. It's a relation of ideas, but they're very simple ideas. Consider the sense experience associated with each, the green circle and the apple. There are significant differences, right? Green circle is easy. that's easy to imagine, and it doesn't require a whole lot of mental effort for you to put that together. Now, if I say a green apple, apples is a whole complex idea in itself, right? There are lots of different kinds of apples. Not all of them are green. This is implied in the idea, the image that it evokes in your mind, that there are not only green apples, there are red and also yellow, is part of the definition of green apple, right? What the green apple tastes like. Not all green apples taste the same. There are differences in geographic location. There have been differences over time. All of these complex ideas get built into it. And if you like apples enough, and if you like green apples, you might actually be thinking to yourself, I can smell that apple. I can taste that apple. These are a complex array of ideas, of sense impressions that reemerge in your conscious conception of your existence right now. All of these complex ideas are coalescing to form what it is that you're thinking about, this green apple, right? So, but all of these, again, are just ideas or impressions of ideas. We don't have anything that we would call knowledge, which isn't reducible to either idea or the impression of ideas. The sense experiences, that remembering tasting an apple, remembering smelling apples, all of the knowledge that you have about apples, green or otherwise, that's all just ideas. You have nothing that you can know about any of the subjects on this page, green circles. There's nothing you can know that's not in the classification of ideas. There's nothing you can know about apples that's not reducible to either ideas or impressions of ideas. When we conjure up images of our minds, in our minds, or when we think about complex ideas, we are arranging a number of simple ideas which we have derived from experience. All knowledge derives from experience. And again, whether you think that we impress that upon the world or the world impresses that upon us, it doesn't matter. All knowledge is derived from experience. I'm going to say this a lot throughout the rest of the semester. All knowledge is derived from experience. That's it. All of our thoughts and feelings, therefore, are combinations and recombinations of our Gnostic experience, things which we experience firsthand. This means that our knowledge, too, comes from experience and from experience alone. So this is a hard rejection of the idea that we have a priori knowledge. We're going to pick this back up and play with it again a little bit later, but for Hume, there is no such thing as a priori knowledge. What we assume is a priori knowledge is our ability to use reason, which we have learned from experiences of the world. Because of this, Hume reasons there are a number of assumptions about the world which we should be skeptical. And with any such unfounded assumptions, we should commit it to the flames. So we can have knowledge. We can have knowledge about ideas and our impressions of ideas. That's it. Everything else we can be skeptical about. And because we can be skeptical about it, we should commit it to the flames. We should not classify it in the category of knowledge like we do. So, one of the main things that we commit to the flames that really is a difficult pill for some people to swallow is causation. Remember, we talked about the principle of sufficient reason. For every event, for every state of affairs that we see in the real world, there's a cause for that state of affairs. And there's a cause for that state of affairs. And there's a cause for that state of affairs. This is the principle of sufficient reason. For every state of affairs, there is a cause. Going back to the dawn of the universe. Hume says we have no reason to believe that is the case, because we can't experience the first cause. We see a state of affairs in the world and assume that this is the product of something which caused that, but we don't have proof. We don't have knowledge of it. So commit that to the flames. We have no reason to assume that cause and effect will maintain their order, that there is any relationship. Prescience, the fact of knowing something before it takes place. We have no justification for the belief that we can reasonably predict the future events. Will striking a cue ball into a 9 ball cause a 9 ball to move? It has always in the past, but to assume that it will in the future, always, every single time, is a natural fallacy. We have no reason to assume that because we don't know the future. We can't predict the future. We can't be in the future. We have good reason to suspect that it will. We don't have knowledge. We can't have certain knowledge that it will, because all of our knowledge is based on experience and we haven't experienced it yet, because it's not an idea or a relation of idea that we have Gnostic experience about. Everything else we should be skeptical about and commit it to the flames. It's not truth. It's not knowledge, and we can't know it. Which means that we also have this problem of the external world. Remember that Locke presupposed that objects in the external world had primary properties, but because we cannot experience those properties immediately, we cannot be sure of what those properties are like. Hume argues that we cannot be sure that the external world has properties at all, or that the external world even exists. We cannot be sure. We cannot have knowledge that the external world exists in any meaningful way. We assume that it does exist. We assume that it has properties because we experience things. We have the impression of experiences. Right? We have this. This is knowledge. We have the impression of the world. We don't have knowledge of the world. And so this kind of presents a problem. This is Hume's fork. It's either ideas or impressions of ideas. Nothing else constitutes as knowledge. Everything else is assumption. Everything else is unjustified assumptions about the nature of existence, about the nature of the world. So this is where we take the skepticism and take it to its natural conclusion. We must inquire how we arrive at the knowledge of cause and effect. I shall venture to affirm that the knowledge of this relation is not in any sense attained by reasoning a priori, but arises entirely from experience. That there is a cause and effect relationship is something that we experience. However, it cannot be the case that the principle of cause and effect could possibly be something that one learns by reason alone, such as the influence of custom and tradition, where it is strongest, it not only covers our natural ignorance, but even conceals itself and seems not to take place, merely because it is founded in the highest degree. And what Hume is drawing attention to here is that we don't question that reality exists. We don't, because nobody before us has taught us that we ought to. So we just assumed it as knowledge. We assumed the existence of the external world as knowledge because everybody else has, and nobody has taught us to question that this world exists. However, as Hume points out, we have no justification for assuming that the external world is something about which we can know anything at all, other than we have the impression that we get ideas from it. So we have the experience of the world. We can't know anything about it aside from this experience, which is necessarily subjective. We don't have access to objective reality, only subjective reality, our ideas, how we understand the world, which is shaped by our culture and society and our history, how we understand these things and how these ideas are valued by us are the product of our cosmological accounts and how we see this relationship, whether we impress the ideas upon the world or the world impresses its ideas upon us. This has massive consequences for us forming ideas about the world, about self. All of these things that we believe are axiomatic that we believe are capital T true, we don't have certain knowledge about. We've built on these as though they're axioms. The world exists. I move through time. I maintain my identity through time. We actually don't have good justification for assuming that these are always going to be consistent, that these are always going to be the case. We don't have knowledge foundations for these that's certain. This is a problem. This is a big problem, right? Even after we have experienced some of the operations and cause and effect, our conclusions from that experience are not founded on reasoning or any other process of understanding. The answer we must endeavor both to explain and to defend, right? We're trying to say, well, cause and effect is always going to work, and we do on this experience that we've had that cause and effect has always worked. But that's what we're trying to prove. We're putting the cart before the horse here, trying to argue that that this cause and effect relationship must cohere because it has always. That's what we're trying to justify, is that it has always. As to the past experience, it can be allowed to give direct and certain information of those precise objects only, in that precise period of time. So that this relationship of cause and effect worked and worked every time before that only gives us certain knowledge about those times which it has worked. It doesn't give us any assurance that it will going forward, that it will in the future, that the nature of existence won't change meaningfully, because our perceptions of the nature of the universe and how those mechanics work do sometimes change. We do have reason to doubt them. To suppose that all of our experimental conclusions proceed upon the presupposition that the future will be conformable to the past must be evidently going in a circle and taking for granted that which is the very point of question. This is what it is to make a natural fallacy. We don't have proof that the sun will rise tomorrow. If you leave for work and you're going to work and you expect, because of the time that you left to make it to work on time, you have good reason to believe that you'll make it to work on time. You don't have certain knowledge that you will, because you can't predict the future. There's any number of things which could intervene with you being able to get to work on time. You don't have certain knowledge that you will get to work on time until you get there and experience that, until you have that Gnostic experience. Then you can justify that as true knowledge. Until you've experienced it, you can't. You can only make assumptions about the probability that you'll get to work on time, that the sun will rise tomorrow, that the 9 ball will be moved by the cue ball if you hit a cue ball into it. We have the assumptions that it will cohere with past, but we don't have justification. We don't have certain knowledge. All of our experiences, experiential conclusions proceed from the presupposition that the future will conform to the past, which is something that we believe because all our predicative conclusions are based upon the experiences that the past has so far conformed to the past. Therefore, this is the vicious cycle. This is the natural fallacy that Hume points out. We therefore have no justification for the assumption that there exists a necessary correlative relationship between cause and effect at all. The principle of sufficient reason, it's not justified. This is a problem in philosophy that actually hasn't been entirely overcome. We're going to have some solutions that we'll talk about next week. Those solutions aren't without their own problems. This issue brought up by Hume's fork hasn't gone away. This is actually a paradox that's formed in philosophy, philosophical thought, that is going to bring us into the revolution of reason, which is why we're going to spend the rest half the semester talking about reason and this revolution of reason, which is caused by Hume's fork. As such, we have no justification for the assumption that future events will conform to the predictions and expectations, committed to the flames, right? At best, we can make inductive assumptions about the nature of reality, cause and effect, and the conformability of future events. This is the end of knowledge, right? This is, it's kind of funny. I love having this title. This is the end of knowledge. Or to put it a different way, this is the limits of epistemology. I've mentioned before that there are some things which are not epistemologically available. This is how we come to understand what is epistemologically available. There are some things that are not knowable. Objective reality, it's not knowable. Everything that we know through experience. Everything that we experience in a place and time. We make assumptions that the ideas that we have about future events will cohere because they have in the past. We don't have knowledge. We don't have certain knowledge that they will. There are limits of epistemology. This is how we understand the limits of our epistemology, that which can be known. So the conclusion of week 4 marks the end of the first half of the semester. Here we are. So far, you have been asked to challenge the basic assumptions upon which your understanding of truth and value are built, the axioms upon which you formalize all your ideas about truth and value. We have discussed the reality that certain knowledge is more elusive than many of us might have supposed. You should now be somewhat skeptical about your own presuppositions. The axioms that you have used to found your ideas of knowledge, your ideas of self, your ideas about the external world, and your relationship with that external world, and about the axioms upon which you have built all of your knowledge. Finally, you should be prepared to take the midterm for this course. And here we go. Cool, that's the last slide. So, questions about Hume's fork. Now this is, Hume's fork is a little bit intense, it's a little bit heavy, and if you need to go back and reread the textbook, if you need to go back and reread the lecture, if you need to go back and review this video, that will probably be helpful to work through some of these complex ideas. This is kind of, so far as understanding the world goes, we have this automatic way of making sense of that which we're faced with. The idea of Hume's fork means that a lot of the assumptions that we make about the world are not just unjustified, they're kind of ludicrous. They're a little bit silly that we make these assertions about truth and knowledge, that we can know these things when we have no justification for the belief that we can know these things, capital K or capital T, truth, know these things, because we can't. We assume a lot about the world, and we don't ask questions about the traditions given to us by culture, given to us by society, given to us by our teachers and our parents and our institutions, which are in place before we're born. All of these things create a world of stuff. And we come to have understanding about how to make judgments by virtue of what is taught to us. Our experiences in this world teach us how to make judgments. And built into this judgment that we make about the world is a whole litany of assumptions. These complex ideas we assume are true. They become presuppositions informed by these axioms of truth and value that we have constructed off of our experiences, which we're now coming to understand a lot of these things are not justifiable, not as certain knowledge, right? Hume's fork illustrates that there are lots of things about the nature of existence and the nature of the external world we simply cannot know.